Hello and welcome to this short practical skills session about how to make a strong password. Um, Passwords are ubiquitous. Every time you make an account online, you're going to need to create a password. That password is there in theory to verify your identity, so to prove that you are who you say you are. But as we will have a little think about as we go through this session, there's a bit of a problem with that. Um, Nevertheless, passwords are the technology that we have for everything. There are some better technologies available for verifying your identity, and we're going to look at those in a different video. But for the time being, we're going to think about passwords because passwords, like I said, are everywhere. On the screen, I've got 4 passwords. I've got one which is IN9 #F, etc. I'm not going to try reading that whole one out. I've got one which says Visual Leftward Oxen, one which says Celtic Football Club, and one which just says password. A, B, C, or D, which do you think is the worst password? I'm hoping that you've all identified that D, password, is the worst password. The other 3 we're going to go through in a second, but I'm just going to explain why something like password is a really bad password. The most sophisticated cyber criminals using sophisticated equipment are able to guess passwords at quite a lot of guesses per second. You might be surprised to find out that the top stuff would be about 200 billion with a B guesses per second. So every second they're guessing 200,000 million different passwords. If your password is in that first 200,000 million, so that first 2 billion, your password's going to give you less than a second's worth of protection. Cybercriminals use common passwords in those first guesses to see if they can get your password just like that. So words like password, sunshine, let me in, princess, monkey, password one, things like this. These are like some of the most common passwords that exist, and essentially they give you no protection at all. So using one common word like password is never going to be a safe thing. A cybercriminal using an attack like this is called a dictionary attack, where they go through lists of really common passwords. They'll be able to get into your account pretty much instantly. That leaves us with 3 other passwords. We've got that jumbled up word, number, special character one up at the top, Visual Leftward Oxen, and Celtic Football Club. I'm going to explain which one the next worst is, and that's Celtic Football Club. Now, there's a couple of reasons for this. The first is that, going back to those dictionary attacks which I was just talking about, cyber criminals aren't going to just stick with those really common phrases or common words. If someone wants to get into your account, they're going to have a look at your online presence, at your social media, that sort of thing, and they'll scrape that, so they'll go through that and find anything particularly relevant to you. If you're on Facebook and you follow Celtic, or there's photos of you in your Celtic kit, or you're posting things up the boys, then it's obviously we can deduce that you're a Celtic fan. If I've got 200 billion guesses in my first second, I'm going to get the computer to come up with some passwords related to Celtic. So if it's Celtic Football Club, again, the likelihood is that's going to come up in those first 200 billion guesses per second, especially if a cyber criminal's gone through my social media and scraped it for anything like that. So Celtic Football Club's a really bad password like that. And actually, we want to make sure that we avoid using anything which is related to us in a password. So names of special people, partners, children, parents, siblings, we want to avoid anything like that. Pet names, that's a really common thing that people put in their passwords, but we want to avoid that completely. Special places, so maybe towns, cities that we've grown up in, house names, anything like that. Special places like where we've got married or holidays, anything like that, that all needs to go. We cannot have these in a password. Things like hobbies, like football clubs or places, things like that we enjoy, they can't be in there either. Anything that is personally related to us, I think a really safe rule is just to assume that it is on the internet somewhere, on our social media, somewhere that we are linked to, Celtic Football Club, and therefore it should not be in our passwords. Looking at the other 2 passwords then, we've got that jumbled up one up at the top and Visual Leftward Oxen. If I was to ask you which one the best is, in previous sessions where I've done this with an audience, we normally get a 2/3 split, with 2/3 of the people saying that the top one is the best, and about a third of the people saying that the second one, visual leftward oxen, is best. And that's, I think, a really interesting thing. And it's a fairly consistent 2/3 split as well. It might come as a surprise to you then to find out that actually visual leftward oxen is the password that the National Cybersecurity Centre would recommend you make over and above that one up at the top. But before we come on to that, I'm going to talk about why these two passwords, or what they've got in common, which is the length. Now, they're both 18 characters long, and really, when we make a password, the thing which makes it strong isn't how complicated it looks to us as a person, but it's the length. Every time you add a character, you make your password at least 96 times more complicated. So if it takes me 5 minutes to crack through one password, if you've added just one character, it's going to take me at least 96 times longer than that 5 minutes to crack through. And so every time we add a character, we make our password much, much harder for a cybercriminal to crack through. With password hygiene and the advice that everybody's been given about passwords, passwords needing to be random characters, random strings of things like this top one, that's something which I think a lot of people believe, and that was the advice that was given to people for quite a long time, up until fairly recently. But we have got one big problem with this top one, which is that it's really difficult to remember. I can't be bothered to read it aloud because it's too long. It's 18 characters long. I'm never going to get through all of that. We've also got a few other problems. That first character, I've said it's a capital I, and I think it must be a capital I because I can see that the L looks different in this font, but it can be really tricky to see what the different characters are like, to see the difference between them. And so if we've got a really difficult password to remember, in fact, one which I'm never going to remember, and I can't even write it down necessarily very easily, this isn't a password that I'm going to be able to use on any important accounts. In the next video, we're going to look at how we can remember passwords better, and why we don't need to remember passwords for everything. But for at least some things, we really do need to be able to remember that password. And this top one, we're just never going to be able to do. In some of the other videos, you might have seen me talk about what I call the security seesaw. On one side of the security seesaw, we've got security, and that's keeping people out. On the other side, we've got accessibility, and that's letting the right people in. That's you, making sure you can get into your account. That top password is skewed too much towards security. It's going to be really difficult for you to get in. And that leaves us with visual leftward oxen. So this is what the National Cybersecurity Centre would recommend you do when you make a password. You get 3 random words, stick them together, and you've got a nice, secure password. Now, what's good about this is I can easily read it, I can easily write it, and I can fairly easily remember it. It's the same number of characters as this top password. They're both 18 characters. Which means that it's going to take about the same amount of time for a cybercriminal to crack through. So, what's really important here to remember is the advice of making passwords that look like this top one. That's outdated. We've got better, newer advice now, which actually makes it easier for you to use a password safely. And the thing we really need is the length of a password. I'm going to show you a couple of tools now. So like I said, the National Cybersecurity Centre recommends using 3 random words. I do this as an exercise quite a lot, as an icebreaker exercise with people. I get people to come up with a 3 random word password, and I've done this for 5 years to thousands of people, and I'll tell you, the same words come up again and again and again. Clock, ball, cup, lamp, dog, plate, window. The things which are immediately around you. What can you see? I tend to avoid using these words. I think they're brilliant words because everyone is using the same words. So, how are we going to come up with 3 better words? Well, we're going to use something called a random word generator. Now, I have literally Googled random word generator. This one's randomwordgenerator.com. I'm going to stick the link in the description on YouTube, so feel free to get it there, but you can also just Google it. I've set this to 3 random words. I could have more random words if I wanted. I'm going to generate 3 random words. Representative close econobox. I don't think I'd have ever picked those 3. We're going to use these to make a secure password. So here's my second tool. This is How Secure Is My Password, and it's hosted by security.org. This is a really, really good little tool. You can write a password in there, and it's going to tell you how strong it is. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to have a look at what password is going to be. That was our first rubbish password. It's going to be cracked instantly. We don't like password as a password. But if we have a look at representative close econobox, representative close econobox, there we are. It's going to take 17 octillion years to crack through, which is brilliant. We need to make sure our passwords last a sensible amount of time using security.org. There's different opinions on what a sensible amount of time is. I would say we really want something at least 5,000 years long. So if we put a password in here and it says it's going to last 8 months, 15 years or whatever, that's not long enough. That password could easily be cracked through in our lifetime, even if it says it's going to be 150 years. With technology advancing, that number's only ever going to come down. So we want something which is going to last for a really, really long time to make sure that that password's safe. So we've put our 3 random words in here, and we've used a random word generator to do that. Doing this is what we need to create a strong password.